Bill Wyman confirmed that he was officially leaving the Rolling Stones after nearly 30 years with the group. Rumors had followed him ever since the Stones wrapped their 1990 tour. He said he had great memories, but his life had moved in a different direction. He had other personal priorities and 3 young daughters to raise. For decades, fans have speculated about the tension within one of rock's most legendary bands. What truly led Bill Wyman, the quiet, steady force behind the Stones' rhythm section, to finally walk away? From the very beginning, he had been part of the group, but he never really lived like the others. While Mick and Keith built empires, Bill, Charlie, and Ronnie often lived more modestly, even during the band's biggest years. 30 years later, Wyman began speaking more openly about his experience. In October 2024, during the launch of a reissue of his memoir, Stone Alone, he answered a question about Keith Richards with unusual directness. He said they had never fully gotten along. He felt no resentment but didn't want to pretend otherwise, explaining that they were simply very different people. He recalled that, in the early days, Brian and Keith often ignored him, even during casual moments like drinks at the bar. For the first time in decades, Wyman offered a deeper look into why he left. According to him, it wasn't about age or pursuing a solo career. It was the slow, persistent feeling that his role was being diminished. He had told the band nearly 2 years before leaving that he didn't want to continue. They still exchanged gifts during the holidays, but he admitted he never felt close enough to Keith to want to spend long periods of time together. Coming from someone who had shared the stage with Richards for so long, the sentiment carried weight. Wyman said he had often been sidelined in the studio, overlooked in the credits, and left out of decisions. In the original edition of Stone Alone, he had already expressed disagreements with Keith's version of the band's early history. Bill described the early Stones as a more democratic group led largely by Brian Jones, an account that differed from Keith's later memoir, which centered the creative force on himself and Mick Jagger. Bill often said he didn't leave because of music itself. He left because the atmosphere had become too difficult. Over time, he felt increasingly unnecessary, even while performing on stage. For more than 30 years, he rarely spoke so openly about it. But in the mid-2020s, in a quiet, smaller interview setting, he finally did. Keith did not respond publicly, and Mick and Ronnie also remained silent. The distance between Wyman and Richards had started decades earlier. Bill was older than the others, born in 1936, into a working-class London family shaped by war and hardship. By the time he joined the Stones in 1962, he was already an adult, while the others were still in their early 20s. He brought his own equipment and far more live experience than many of them had at the time. But despite this, he never felt fully included in the band's inner circle. He wrote in his journal in 1962 that he sometimes felt more like a piece of equipment than a band member. Still, he focused on the music and became known as the most reliable player in the group. His steady, grounded style helped anchor albums throughout the 1960s. But as the Stones' fame grew, the personal divide widened. His closest ally in the band, Brian Jones, became increasingly isolated before his death in 1969. Afterward, Bill felt the gap between him and the others grow even more. He once refused to fly on the band's private jet, a decision that reportedly frustrated Keith and created more distance. By the mid-1960s, songwriting credit had consolidated under the Jagger-Richards partnership, while Bill and the others contributed mainly as performers. The imbalance in recognition continued for decades. In his memoir, Bill mentioned playing a role in the development of certain riffs, but the official credits remained unchanged. He never pursued legal action and rarely spoke publicly about it, but he admitted that the dynamics sometimes left him feeling overlooked. He revealed in 2024 that by the mid-1980s, during a break in the band's touring schedule, he had fallen into significant debt. While Jagger and Richards continued to earn steady royalties from their songwriting catalog, Bill stated simply that he earned a fraction of what they did, despite sharing the workload of performing, recording, and promoting for more than 20 years. Decisions involving albums, tours, and personnel rarely included him. In a later released interview from 1991, he explained that he wasn't excluded, he was simply never invited. Outside the band, Bill supported himself through photography, writing, and small projects. He emphasized that the early Stones were a band, not a corporation. Over time, he felt the shift away from artistry and toward business, and he became more distant from the core leadership by the late 1980s. In early 1990s, Bill felt disconnected during recording sessions. He often arrived ready to work, only to learn that parts had already been recorded by others. This sense of separation grew during the Steel Wheels and Urban Jungle tours. On stage, he performed every night, but behind the scenes, he played no role in major decisions and sometimes felt like a hired player rather than a founding member. When the Stones were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1989, Keith's acceptance speech did not mention Bill. Fans noticed, even if the moment passed quietly in the press. By 1991, Bill told the band he intended to leave. The conversation was brief, and he later described Mick and Keith's reaction as ungracious. Keith made remarks in later years, suggesting Bill was replaceable, while Mick brushed off questions about the new bassist. Bill said he had stayed longer than he should have. Darryl Jones eventually took over bass duties, though he remained a session and touring musician rather than a formal band member. Many fans saw Bill's departure as the moment the Stones shifted permanently from a traditional band to a two-man leadership structure. After leaving, Bill stayed active in music. In 1997, he formed Bill Wyman's Rhythm Kings, returning to the blues and jazz that had inspired him long before joining the Stones. Free from commercial pressure, the group toured smaller venues and released several albums praised for their authenticity. Bill also continued releasing solo work and developed a distinct vocal style. Beyond music, he pursued photography, archaeology, and writing. His detailed personal archives became the foundation for several books, including Rolling with the Stones, considered one of the most thorough visual histories of the band. Although he no longer performed with the Stones, Bill kept occasional contact with his former band, especially Charlie Watts, until Charlie's passing. In 2012, Bill briefly joined the Stones on stage for their 50th anniversary concerts. In 2023, he appeared quietly on the track, Live by the Sword, marking his first official recording with the band in decades, and the final track to feature Charlie. In later interviews, Bill spoke calmly about his time with the Stones. He didn't seek reconciliation, but he didn't dwell on the past either. He often said he had given enough and felt no regrets about leaving. He had been the steady pulse of the band for more than 30 years, shaping its sound with quiet consistency rather than spotlight moments. Bill kept extensive journals and archives that have become invaluable to music historians. His influence extended far beyond the Stones, inspiring generations of bassists who admired his precision and subtle power. He never needed to return to the band or fight for credit. He chose peace, creativity, and independence. More than 3 decades later, his departure still raises an important question. Does an artist need to speak loudly to prove their worth, or can silence itself be a kind of dignity?